I am Lupe Flores, Deputy Director of Communications and Outreach for the Future of California Elections. And I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Chairman Benjamin Hovland. He is the chairman of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, and he graciously agreed to address us despite being on the other side of the country. Mr. Hovland has a distinguished career in public service, not only serving as the commissioner as a commissioner on the UEAC, but also as a federal officer with the Technical Guidelines Development Committee. He has been committed to improving election administration and removing barriers to voting. His most recent position, he was acting chief counsel for the U.S. Senate Committee on Rules of Administration, where he was a driving force behind Congress appropriating $380 million in Help America Vote Act. Earlier in his career as the Deputy General Counsel for the Missouri Secretary of State's office, Mr. Hovland focused on legal issues related to the administration of state and federal elections, including recounts, poll worker training, voter registration list maintenance, statewide database matching, voter education resources, and ballot initiative litigation. I'd like you all to welcome Mr. Hovland. Thank you very much again, Chairman, for joining us.
I appreciate the opportunity to join the Future of California Elections and this great group of speakers in discussing this important topic. The novel coronavirus, or COVID-19, is presenting unprecedented challenges around our country, and as this virtual conference has highlighted, the election administration community is facing real challenges determining how best to conduct elections in this environment. At the EAC, we've pivoted substantially to focus our attention on how we can support state and local election officials as they make tough decisions about their primaries and the general election. We've done this by working within the critical infrastructure subsector on a number of products. The EAC is leading a joint working group between the Government Coordinating Council and the Sector Coordinating Council. Essentially what that got state and local election officials, along with private industry experts, working with staff from the EAC and the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, or CISA, on a number of documents that address considerations and best practices for voting during the pandemic. The EAC has also hosted a number of Zoom videos or web chats where we bring together experts from the elections field to discuss best practices and lessons learned on particular topics. One of those was Orange County's own Neil Kelly that we heard from earlier today. But I'm hopeful that these videos and the other resources I mentioned can help with the unique challenges election officials face. I also believe these resources are excellent for this community and the participants on this call to provide useful information and background on the election administration considerations that must be taken into account. Much of what we've heard today is on there, and then other issues as well that you really need to look at in figuring out how to best administer an election at this time, or the things that need to be considered. But ultimately, with the 50 states running elections 50 different ways, each state is in a different place determining the best way for their state to proceed. It's been great to hear more today about what's going on in California, but at the EAC, we see this all across the country, and we certainly see that in the grant request letters that we've been receiving from states as we distribute the $400 million in CARES Act funding that Congress provided for elections. The CARES Act was signed into law on March 27th. I'm pleased to report that the EAC awarded all 56 CARES Act grants on April 6th, and currently 54 states and territories have requested disbursement of the funds and submitted descriptions on their anticipated activities. The two remaining states have been in communication with us, and they're going to submit their request as soon as they get approval from their state legislature. But as was mentioned earlier, California's portion of the CARES Act funding is over $36 million. And many of the initiatives Secretary Padilla mentioned at the beginning of this conference are part of California's plan to utilize this funding. In our communications with states regarding the CARES Act funding, we've heard that election officials are anticipating a wide array of costs associated with responding to the pandemic. For example, costs associated with increased telework, such as laptops or mobile IT equipment, Most commonly, we're hearing about increased costs associated with mail ballots, costs like increased printing and postage, additional processing equipment, high-speed scanners, and drop boxes, but also costs that include systematic upgrades that allow online absentee mail ballot requests in some states that need them, or expanding state portals to ensure that voters with disabilities have access to the tools that can enable expanded use of mail ballots. Also, increased needs around personal protective equipment, or PPE, deep cleaning of polling places, sanitizing supplies, expanded curbside access, and certainly looking for new locations for polling places that allow for that social distancing that we heard again discussed earlier. Clearly there's not a shortage of needs or work to be done. And today's conversation has highlighted many of the issues and to me, how everyone's help is needed in getting this done. And while you could certainly, I have the privilege of largely ending things. So, certainly, you could end today overwhelmed by the challenges we're facing. But my takeaway is to celebrate what's being done. And knowing that dedicated Americans like those of you participating today are working to make a difference, working to protect and promote our democracy. We don't know everything about what November will look like. I am speaking to you from a few hours in the future, but not far enough into the future to know everything. But we know much of what can be done to make November better, encouraging our fellow Americans to register to vote or update their registration, helping recruit poll workers and bilingual poll workers. There may be some changes in state procedures, as has been discussed here today, but helping to educate and organize voters will be as crucial as it's ever been to conducting elections in 2020. Again, the need for voter education will be crucial. The need for, as we've heard about today, voters hearing and getting this information from trusted sources, whether that's state and local election officials, or from the communities that they trust. So certainly encourage that. Overall, I'd just say, I'm privileged to serve in this role as the EAC chairman, and I get to see so much of the collaborative work that is happening around the country. I'd like to end by thanking all of you for participating in this virtual conference today, along with all the work that you've done and all the work I know you will do before November. Thank you.